I never thought I would agree to something like this. When my boss, Richard Calloway, the man everyone in the company either feared or admired, summoned me to his office, I expected a tough conversation. Maybe a warning, maybe a promotion. What I didn't expect was an offer that made my pulse hammer against my ribs. He wanted me to take his daughter out on a date. Not for fun, not for romance, but because, according to him, she was going through a difficult time, and he thought I could cheer her up. It sounded absurd. And yet, the moment he mentioned the payment, my breath caught. The amount he was offering was ridiculous, more than enough to clear my debts, take care of rent, and give me a cushion I hadn't had in years. My mind was already racing through the possibilities, the way a drowning person claws at the surface for air. I should have said no. Right then and there, I should have walked out. But before I could, he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a sleek black folder, and slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. Take a look. I hesitated, then flipped it open. And that was when everything got complicated. Her photograph stared back at me. Dark, intense eyes that carried a storm behind them. A sharp jawline, lips pressed together in defiance, like she was daring whoever looked at her to try and understand her. Her hair was wild, cascading past her shoulders in loose waves that looked like they had a mind of their own. She didn't look like someone who needed a stranger's company. If anything, she looked like the kind of woman who would see right through a lie. A part of me, something deep and instinctual, knew this was trouble. This isn't about setting her up with someone, Calloway continued, his voice measured. She's stubborn, angry even, and I don't blame her. Her mother walked out last year, and I've been busy. She keeps everyone at arm's length. But you, he leaned forward, assessing me the way a hunter watches prey. She won't see you coming. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or disturbed. I cleared my throat. Mr. Calloway, with all due respect, I'm not a therapist. If she's struggling, maybe she needs. I know what she needs, he cut in. His tone was final. I need someone who isn't afraid to push back. Someone who can match her fire but won't burn her out. And I think that's you. I swallowed hard. This was insane. And yet the money. God, the money. Calloway watched me carefully. He already knew I was considering it. Maybe he had seen the desperation in my eyes before I even realized it was there. If she finds out, she'll hate you, I said quietly. He didn't flinch. Then don't let her find out. I should have walked away. I should have shut the folder, left his office, and pretended this conversation never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up the photo again, tracing the edges of the image with my fingertips. And for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I found myself whispering, "What's her name?" Calloway smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a man gives when he knows he's won. Lena. The name lingered in my mind long after I left his office, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I had no idea what I had just gotten myself into. But something told me I was about to find out. The moment I saw her, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Lena Calloway walked into the restaurant like she owned the place. Shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, an effortless confidence that made people turn their heads. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. Dark eyes scanning the room, full lips pressed into a near smirk, like she already knew something the rest of us didn't. I had picked the restaurant carefully, a dimly lit, quiet place in the heart of the city, where the hum of conversation drowned out the world outside. I wanted neutral ground, somewhere that wouldn't make her feel cornered. But the second she spotted me at the table, I knew none of that would matter. She approached slowly, her expression unreadable, and then, without sitting, tilted her head and said, "Okay, so who paid you?" My stomach dropped. I blinked, playing dumb. "What?" She sighed like she was already bored. "Look, I don't do blind dates. And I definitely don't do setups. So who sent you? Was it one of my father's assistants? Or did he ask you himself?" I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "Wow, you really know how to welcome a person." She didn't smile. "I don't like bullshit. So answer the question." Damn it. I had prepared for this, for the possibility that she'd be suspicious. But I didn't expect her to know immediately. I leaned back, trying to keep my cool. "What if I just happened to want to have dinner with you?" She let out a dry chuckle, finally sliding into the seat across from me. "Right, because strangers are just dying to date Richard Calloway's daughter." There was something in her tone, bitterness maybe. Like she expected people to have ulterior motives. Like she had seen this before. I wanted to change the subject, steer the conversation toward anything other than the truth. But before I could, the first real shift happened. Her eyes narrowed, locking onto mine, and she asked, "What do you really want?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the way she said it. It was the way she looked at me. Like she could see right through my skin, past the carefully constructed mask I was wearing, and into the mess of guilt and hesitation underneath. And then, a loud crash. A chair scraping violently against the floor. A voice rising, sharp and angry. I turned just in time to see a man standing near the bar, his face flushed with rage, his hand clenched around the collar of another guy's shirt. People started shifting in their seats, murmurs of discomfort rippling through the restaurant. It happened fast, too fast. The man threw a punch, knocking the other guy backward into a table, sending glasses shattering against the tile floor. A woman shrieked. Someone knocked over a chair, and suddenly chaos erupted. I barely had time to react before I felt it. Lena's hand grabbing mine. It was instinct, pure reflex. Her fingers curled tightly around mine, her palm warm against my skin, and for a split second, everything else faded. The fight, the noise, the fact that she was suspicious of me. For that moment, she trusted me. I turned to her, and something flickered across her face. Something vulnerable, something real. But as soon as I saw it, she pulled away, her expression hardening again like nothing had happened. "We should go," she said, standing. I nodded, throwing a couple of bills on the table, and followed her out into the cool night air. We walked in silence for a few blocks, the energy between us crackling with something I couldn't name. She was the first to speak. "That was a disaster." I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "You think?" She stopped walking, turned to face me, arms crossed. "You never answered my question." I swallowed hard. "Which one?" Her dark eyes locked onto mine. "What do you really want?" I opened my mouth, searching for the right answer. I should have told her the truth. But instead, I said, "I just wanted to get to know you." She studied me, her expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, the corner of her lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "You're a terrible liar." And just like that, she turned and kept walking. I didn't know what had shifted between us that night. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about the money anymore. Something had changed. And I wasn't ready for what was coming next. Part 3. Between desire and deception. I couldn't deny it anymore. The way Lena looked at me, like I was someone worth knowing, worth wanting, made something in my chest tighten painfully. Every glance she threw my way, every accidental touch sent a current through me, something sharp and unexpected, something I hadn't felt in years. And it scared the hell out of me. Because I knew the truth. I knew that this thing between us, this slow-burning, impossible thing, was built on a lie. A lie that was growing heavier with every stolen moment, every shared breath. I should have told her. I tried to tell her. But every time I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. Not when she laughed, tilting her head back, her guard slipping just enough for me to see the girl underneath the steel and fire. Not when she looked at me like I was something more than a paycheck, more than a mistake waiting to happen. And definitely not when she kissed me for the first time. It happened on a night I hadn't planned for, when everything blurred into something reckless and real. We had spent hours walking through the city, the air crisp with the promise of rain, neon lights casting reflections on the wet pavement. She was different that night, softer, almost hesitant. "You're not what I expected," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I swallowed hard. "What did you expect?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second, I thought maybe she could see everything. Every secret, every lie. But instead of calling me out, she whispered, something easy to walk away from. And then she kissed me. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Her lips were warm, urgent, like she was searching for something, like she needed to know if this was real. And God help me, I kissed her back. I let myself believe it was real. That night, everything changed. There was no more pretense, no more careful distance. She let me in. She told me things I knew she didn't tell anyone else. About her mother leaving, about the nights she stayed awake wondering if she was worth sticking around for. And I held her. I held her knowing I was the worst kind of liar. Knowing that when the truth came out, it would destroy her. And then, the bomb exploded. I didn't see it coming. 1 minute, I was walking into Lena's apartment, ready to tell her everything. The next, she was standing in the center of the room, her face pale, her hands shaking. Holding a piece of paper I recognized immediately. A check. The check. The one her father had written out to me. My stomach dropped. She looked up, eyes burning. "How long?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Lena." How long have you been lying to me? Her voice cracked on the last word, but the anger didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. I took a step forward, desperate to fix this, but she backed away. No, she said, shaking her head. You don't get to do that. You don't get to look at me like that. Let me explain. She let out a bitter laugh. Explain? Explain? What is there to explain? You took money to go out with me. To pretend. It wasn't pretend. My voice was raw. Not for me. Her hands clenched into fists. Don't. Just don't. Do you have any idea how stupid I feel right now? How fucking used? Lena, please. Was it worth it? She asked, voice shaking. Did he pay you enough? I felt something crack inside me. God, Lena, stop. My voice broke on the word. You think this was just about money? She laughed again, but it sounded more like a sob. Wasn't it? I took another step toward her, ignoring the way she flinched. I was supposed to take you out, that's it. One date. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you. Her jaw tightened, her breath shaky. But you still lied. I didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. I had lied. And I had lost her. I saw it happen in real time. The way her expression hardened. The way she shut down right in front of me. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. Then she walked to the door and opened it. Leave. My chest ached. Lena. Leave. I hesitated, my heart screaming at me to fix this, to do something. But I had already done enough damage. So I walked out. And this time, I wasn't sure she'd ever let me back in. Part 4. The climax no one expected. Lena's eyes burned with a mixture of fury and heartbreak, and it felt like a punch straight to the chest. So it was all a lie? Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. She wanted me to see it, the pain, the betrayal, the devastation I had caused. No, my voice was hoarse, desperate. Lena, no. It was never a lie. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking her head. Don't do that. Don't stand there and try to twist this into something it's not. I took a step toward her, but she stepped back just as quickly, like I was something toxic, something she couldn't bear to be near. I could feel the ground crumbling beneath me. I had lost people before, but never like this. Never her. I was going to tell you. I tried again. I swear to God, I was going to tell you everything. But you didn't. Her voice cracked. You let me fall for you while you were still lying to me. I flinched. Because she was right. I had held her. Kissed her. Let her believe that this, we, had started as something real. And then, like a fucking coward, I had let her find out on her own. Her breath hitched, her hands curling into fists. Tell me something, she said, eyes glistening. When did you plan to confess? After another date? After another night in my bed? She shook her head, swallowing back the emotion threatening to choke her. Or were you just waiting until my father cut you another check? My stomach twisted painfully. Lena, stop. Her laugh was hollow. Why? Does it hurt? Does it feel like your entire fucking chest is caving in? She sucked in a breath, her voice barely above a whisper. Because that's what you did to me. I had never felt more helpless in my life. I wanted to fix this. I wanted to reach for her, pull her into me, and make her believe that none of this had ever been about the money. But how could she believe me now? I opened my mouth, scrambling for anything that would make her stay. But before I could speak, a sharp voice sliced through the tension like a knife. Well, Richard Calloway said, stepping into the doorway. That went about as well as I expected. Lena went rigid. I turned, every muscle in my body tensing. Of course he was here. Of course he was watching the wreckage unfold, his expression unreadable, his gaze sharp as ever. Lena's jaw clenched. You. Her father sighed, stepping fully into the room like he owned the air we breathed. Don't look at me like that, sweetheart. You were always going to find out eventually. Find out what? She snapped. That you paid someone to babysit me? That you couldn't even be bothered to talk to your own daughter? So you threw money at the problem? Richard's face remained impassive. No, his gaze flickered to me, then back to her. That I was right. Lena let out a disbelieving laugh. Excuse me? Her father exhaled, slow and deliberate. I never wanted her to date you, kid, he said, nodding toward me. I wanted her to fall in love with you. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. My pulse pounded in my ears. Lena blinked. Once. Twice. What? Richard tilted his head slightly. I paid her to take you out, yes. But I knew exactly what I was doing. His lips quirked up in something that wasn't quite a smile. I chose her because I knew she'd get under your skin. I knew you'd fight it, and I knew she'd fight it. But in the end, I also knew you wouldn't be able to help yourselves. I felt sick. Lena's entire body trembled, her hands shaking at her sides. You set me up? Her voice was barely a whisper. Richard didn't flinch. You were stuck, Lena. Drowning in anger, in grief, in your own stubbornness. I needed to wake you up. She let out a broken breath. By manipulating me? Richard's expression finally shifted, just slightly. By showing you that you still had it in you. She stared at him like she didn't even recognize him. And I couldn't fucking move. I had been a pawn in this the entire time. Not just someone Richard Calloway had hired to keep his daughter entertained, but someone he had handpicked to break down her walls. And I had walked right into it. I had fallen in love with her. Exactly the way he wanted me to. Lena let out a breath that sounded suspiciously close to a sob, then turned her gaze back to me. For the first time since this entire thing had unraveled, I saw something flicker behind her eyes that wasn't just anger. It was something worse. It was hurt. Raw. Unforgiving. I swallowed hard, my voice barely there. Lena, I swear. But she didn't wait for me to finish. She turned, walked past her father, and didn't look back. The door slammed behind her, and just like that, she was gone. I stood there, breathless, my chest aching in a way that felt permanent. Richard studied me for a long moment, then let out a sigh. She'll come around. I turned to him, my hands shaking with the force of everything I was trying to hold in. What if she doesn't? Richard just shrugged. Then you'll have to make her believe you. I let out a shaky breath, my mind spinning. Because he was right. And I was going to do whatever it took to prove to Lena Calloway that we had never been a lie.